the more junior officers, the mates, and these are the guys who do the navigation, who stand on the quarterdeck in all weathers and make sure that the crew is doing their jobs.
Go. How you doing back there, Matt?
I'm good, Jay. How are you?
Doing good.
In 1787, when Captain John Kendrick was choosing officers for the Columbia expedition, the first two selections could have been made for him. Robert Gray, who previously captained a ship for owners Crowell Hatch and Samuel Brown, would command the Lady Washington. Simeon Woodruff, first officer of the ship Columbia, had served under British explorer James Cook in the Pacific 8 years before, but Kendrick's pick for second officer of Columbia would have been his own. We came back to the Mass Historical Society to find out more on Joseph Ingraham. One reference said he was baptized at the new brick church in Boston's North End. Problem is, we couldn't figure out where that is today.
Peter, maybe you know, the new brick church.
Yep.
It's not still in existence, is it, in the North End?
No. Yeah, this is, so
7.
new brick is 7, so that's right here. It would be hard for me to believe that there isn't going to be something there to mark it.
Right, it would show that had been the site of the new brick church.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, and he was baptized there, then there's no doubt that he lived
I think that's
in the neighborhood.
Safely, yeah.
Do we know the denomination?
Yeah, it would be congregational at that time.
Why don't you call me tomorrow? We can grab a cup of joe and think that I'll get by.
So Joseph Ingraham was born here in 1762. This was the site of the new brick church where he was baptized.
His father was a wealthy sea captain and slave trader, but moved the family out of pre-war Boston in 1773 to the relative peace of the countryside. Joseph Ingraham was 13 when, 2 years later, the war started practically in his backyard, in Concord. Massachusetts formed its own state navy during the war, and at 17, Ingraham signed on board its flagship, the Protector. Not as a sailor, but as a drummer boy. A couple months later, he took part in the bloodiest naval battle of the Revolution when the Protector attacked and blew up a British privateer, the Admiral Duff, off Newfoundland. But soon back in Boston, Ingraham deserted. 5 months later, in December of 1780, he signed back on board. Still lacking sailing experience, though, he became a seagoing soldier, a Marine. After months of cruising the Caribbean, the Protector headed north, seizing prizes as she went along the east coast. But just off Block Island, she ran into a couple of British warships she couldn't outrun.
So what am I gonna write about today? Let's see.
In May of 1781, Ingraham and his shipmates on the Protector were taken to Wallabout Bay, between Manhattan and Brooklyn, and confined to the British ship Jersey, otherwise known to its residents as Hell.
I think I'll write about myself.
The British prison ships were a terrible fate for thousands and thousands of American sailors, both merchant mariners, privateersmen, and members of the various navies in the conflict. And conditions on board these ships were really grim. Many thousands died from disease. Malnutrition contributed to the disease. Of course, just squalor crowded tens of thousands into these old British warships that the gun ports had been pretty much sealed up on. So there's no light, no air, very little food, lots of lice, lots of microbes.
They weren't chained together, or were they?
No, probably not. It's hell afloat, to be sure.
Wallabout Bay is just beyond the Manhattan Bridge before you get to Williamsburg Bridge there, right in front of the Brooklyn Navy Yard.
Yeah.
And so you can see shore. I mean, either side, you're not that far from land, really, and yet...
yeah, but it doesn't help if you can't swim. And not that many American sailors could swim. Maybe if you can throw something over the side, the chances of getting into a boat are slim to none. There are sentinels there who are going to shoot to kill if they think you're trying to escape. That's not to say people didn't escape. They did on occasion. Some were exchanged off the ships. There was an agreement made between the American forces and the British, so if your time came up, you could get off that way. There were ways out, but certainly a common way off those ships was simply to die.
The British were controlling New York City and the opposite shore.
And Long Island, including all of what's now Brooklyn and Staten Island as well, is all British loyalist Hessian-controlled territory. So even if you got ashore, you're still in enemy territory. You've got a long way to go before you're free.
Bob your head now, get your soul back.
There's pretty high mortality.
There's huge mortality. Thousands of people dying, and they're getting not thrown into the harbor so much as rowed ashore and buried on the beach, and not buried especially well. It's not long after the Revolution at all that people are complaining that these bones are coming out of the sandbank, and it's no way to treat the bodies of these Revolutionary War veterans.
And the British wouldn't have had really any regard for what they saw as simply rebels.
They treat them pretty poorly. I mean, they are rebels against the crown. They're troublemakers, and the war isn't going well for the British. They're bitter about it. They're not happy, and so they're making life difficult for these prisoners.
There's no record on when Joseph Ingraham was released from the Jersey. Some of his shipmates were sent to the Old Mill prison in England, while a few lucky others returned home to Boston after a few months. Others were confined for nearly a year, well after the final defeat of the British at Yorktown. But eventually, Ingraham did return to Boston. In 1785, he married Jenny Salter. He must have gained some experience sailing, when 2 years later, John Kendrick tapped him as a second officer. When the Columbia expedition left Boston on that autumn day in 1787, on the first American voyage around the world, Joseph Ingraham would leave Jenny with a 2-week-old son that he would never see again.
I know you like that. Let your backbone slip.